Hi, welcome to Hillcrest Sermons, growing together.
Show us your heart's delight.
Well, hello. Good morning, everyone. If you have not met me before, my name is Kristen. I'm really excited to be with you this morning. I've actually been attending Hillcrest, I think, since 2012, maybe a little bit before that. And I got involved here because of my involvement in Campus Christian Fellowship when I was a student. And fast forward a little bit, as Tim mentioned, I got to join the CCF staff and become a campus missionary to those same students that I once was. And I love campus ministry. In just a few short weeks, July 15th, I will be driving away from this beautiful place to Alaska to get to continue to do campus ministry up there. And I'm really excited about that. I'm from Bellingham, actually. I was born here. I was raised in Everson. So this is like my home. This is where I'm from. And so I thought that it would be fun to show you a little picture of me as a child, so that you can just, this was Kristen in her growing up days in this county girl. I thought, the more that I looked at this photo, the more I was like, my hair is in a ponytail, and I have one strand of beads. That is just so stylish. Also, all of those clothes are coming back. I'm seeing students wear the clothes that I grew up in, and I'm like, I am not old at all. I'm not. But that's weird. Okay, so when I fast forward, picture this girl 8 years in the future. When I was 14, my family moved to Eniat. And if you've never heard of Eniat, you've probably drove through it and didn't know, because it is so small. If you've ever been to Lake Chelan, you probably drove through Eniat. The whole city, for the most part, exists on one road. There's a small grocery store and a gas station, and not much else. K through 12 is one building, and so there's 22 kids in the entire grade that I joined. And most of those kids had known each other since kindergarten. And my family decided to move in the middle of the school year. So wintertime, here I am trying to join into this community that is so tight-knit. So I decided, this spunky little girl, I was like, I'm athletic, so I'm going to play every sport possible. And so wintertime was volleyball time. So I joined the volleyball team. And I showed up, and I had the wrong knee pads. They weren't the same as everyone else. Strike one. I didn't have Nike shorts. Strike two. We would do these volleyball drills where you'd have to stand in line and wait for your turn to bump, set, or spike, I don't know. And no one would talk to me in line. And then it was even worse when we'd get to the locker room and I would just see stares or hear whispers of people talking about me. And it felt like there was no space for me on the volleyball team. It felt like there was no space for me to build relationships with any of the girls. And it really felt like there was no space for me in this school. Have you ever felt a desire to be seen, wanted, and accepted by those around you? I think with social media, it's propelled us into this world where we are hyper connected, but actually very disconnected at the same time. We have hundreds of friends, right? But do they actually know the person on the other side of the computer or phone? Do people actually see us? Does it leave us longing for genuine acceptance? And there might be some of you here who've experienced even worse things that have led you to believe that you are not seen, or valuable, or wanted. I think all of us, in the back of our hearts, has this cry, this longing to be told that we are worth making space for. But isn't it awfully hard to actually make space for other people, sometimes in the same way that we also desire to make space? Sometimes maybe when the doorbell rings, we like run and hide. I don't have one of those holes that you can like look through and see who's at the door. So if I'm not ready for someone, I will run and hide. So bad. I'm embarrassed. I'm like hiding on the other side, waiting for them to do I hear their footsteps go away? I don't know. Or when an unexpected phone call for hospitality, or an unexpected guest comes and it feels like an inconvenience. Do those things, does it feel like a burden? Just as much as we long for space to be made for us, to be seen and valued, we can sometimes be just as guilty to miss those around us and not make space for other people. So we are going to look and see, we're going to look at a couple different meals and see how Jesus shares the table with unexpected people and how he makes space for them. I'm going to start with verses 1 through 6. On the Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. And Jesus asked the Pharisee and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Whoa, did I just skip ahead? I don't know. Okay. Then they asked him, I don't know if I skipped ahead. If I did, I'm so sorry. Then they asked him, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into the well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And he had nothing to say. Okay, so we know that physician Luke is a detailed writer, and he makes the point to tell the reader that Jesus was going to eat at the house of a prominent Pharisee on the Sabbath, which is a day of rest. And he tells us that the Pharisees were paying very close attention to Jesus, like watching every little detail, everything that he was doing. But then he mentions there's a sick man, right? And then he goes right back to telling us more information about a conversation between Jesus and the Pharisees. So when Luke finally gets to the healing part of the story, what he says is he takes a hold of the man, he heals him, and sends him on his way. But then he gets right back to telling us a little bit more about the Pharisees and Jesus. It's really interesting to me that Luke pays more attention to the Pharisees and Jesus' relationship, what he's saying to them, than the healing itself. We see these Pharisees protecting the Sabbath and creating a lot of distance from this sick man. And it might be really easy for us to think, well, it's the Pharisees. It's those stuck-up, rule-snobby guys. They just want to pay, whatever. We distance ourselves from the Pharisees. But there is so much more to the story. Sabbath and food laws were things that their great-grandparents died to protect. During the Maccabean revolt, the empire overlords were trying to squash the Jewishness out of the Jews. So their great-grandparents died because they refused to eat pork. The Pharisees' great-grandparents died because they would not get circumcised. They died protecting the symbols that remind them of who they are and whose they belong to. And I think that we have symbols that we would die for too. This actually fits really well with this weekend. I didn't even plan that, right? Our military men and women put their lives on the line every day for our flag and our freedom. But here, Jesus is messing with the Pharisees' symbols, what they hold so dear, what they've worked so hard to protect and preserve. Jesus, in a sense, is stepping on their flag. What they are doing, they think is actually right. But Jesus, who is God among them, is the only one who can actually say, let me tell you what is right and what is wrong. And he says, guess what? There's a new way to fold your flag. Jesus was pushing them outside of their comfort zone. And I think we all have a little Pharisee in us. Is there anything that Jesus would say? I know that that was sacred to your great-grandparents, to your forebears in the faith. But you don't need to protect that anymore. We must do it this way. We must say it this way. Mindsets or traditions that blind us to other people. For the sake of making space for everyone, lay it down. And yet, at the same time, I think it's really important to acknowledge that Jesus ate with the Pharisees. He made space for them, and they mattered to Jesus. I think we might feel a little bit like both of the characters at some points, a little Pharisaical and a bit like the other man, unseen and overlooked. And the point that Jesus is trying to make is there is space at my table for everyone. And the story is not over, right? Jesus runs into this unwanted, uninvited dinner guest, a sick man. And the man had abnormal swelling on his body. And this disease was one that was viewed as a result of sin in a person's life. So, again, this would have made the Pharisees run because they would have truly believed that in order to honor and preserve what their great-grandparents died to protect, then eating dinner with a sinner would have made them guilty of sin as well. So in their mind, distance from a sinner is the way that you honor the Torah. But here, Jesus is breaking all the rules. Yeah, okay. He's breaking all the rules, and he is showing them what really matters. He cared more about healing the man rather than the day he was being healed on. He's saying it's appropriate to show compassion on any day to any person, no matter the tradition, no matter who they are. To this uninvited dinner guest, Jesus says, there is space for you at my table. He's pushing up against what the Pharisees thought was true about who deserves love and grace and time. Jesus draws near to sinners. He does not distance himself from them. And we'll see, if we jump ahead to Luke 19, we'll see Luke, everything culminates to, he writes this Jesus' thesis statement for Luke. And this is where Jesus says to yet another uninvited outsider at a meal, he says, I'm just going to read a little part of this. He says, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Jesus makes space for sinners. We have all missed the mark, and yet Jesus came so that we could all be invited to his table. He draws near to us. Jesus is in the practice of sharing his table with everyone. And Luke goes on in this story to elaborate even more at the dinner table. And I want to show you a picture of where this would have taken place. It would have looked something like this. At an ancient meal, the table was usually in the shape of a U. And the host would sit at the base of the U, and honored guests would sit on either side of the host. So with that in mind, you can look at that picture as I read this next section. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give this person your seat." Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when the host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all of those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your sisters or your relatives or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Often, in an ancient meal, an honored guest would arrive last, one of the last to arrive, which would make for some awkward rearranging, right? Someone comes up to them and be like, "Ooh, that spot, sorry, you're not good enough for that spot. You gotta get up in front of everyone and move around." The Pharisees were already really ruffled by Jesus. He's telling them that you need to get close to sinners, and you can do it on any day. He is once again pushing them outside of their traditions, making them uncomfortable, and telling them that they need to dine with, get close to stinky, sick, undeserving people. The traditions and laws that they held so tightly to got them into a place where they were siloed and they were not making space for others. Jesus came to disrupt these traditions so that everyone would have space at his table, no matter their status, what they have to offer, or what they have done. We might not physically do this, like at a table, tell people, "Move around, you're not good enough for that chair." But I think we might socially do this. Have you ever gotten to a room, maybe a party, I don't know what, and you were acknowledged? Someone addressed you, included you into the conversation, and you felt maybe a sense of relief, "Oh, I belong here." Whew. But does it stop there? Does it stop at relief? Or do we look for others who might not have been included as quickly as we were? What does our modern day dining room table look like? Who do we give our time and attention to? We are attracted to those who are most like us, who we have things in common with, who look like us. And that makes sense, right? I am guilty of this. But at the same time, I want to pause and acknowledge the ways that our awesome Hillcrest community has made space, welcoming refugees. Right? We just also finished a week of the Royal Family Kids Camp, and there are so many of you awesome volunteers that gave up a week, maybe unpaid time off, right, to love on foster kiddos who have experienced neglect, abuse, and abandonment. You showed them how Jesus wants them at his table. These little ones are in no way capable of paying you back, right? But you invited them to the table because Jesus invited you, and he invites them. I think, however, that there is an opposite to making space. And I think that the opposite of making space is tunnel vision. The Pharisees let rules and regulations give them tunnel vision. They so fervently desired to protect their Jewish identity that it prevented them from making space for anyone. And I think we can get tunnel vision too. Tunnel vision with our time. I can't stop and talk. I am on a mission. I gotta go. Or maybe at the end of small group, you see that maybe someone needs prayer, but you're like, I gotta get home. I have things I have to do, or I have to relieve a babysitter. Tunnel vision with our time. I think we can get tunnel vision with our friendships. Maybe you're in a certain season of life, and so it would make sense for you to hang out with people in the same season of life as you. When you are planning a dinner party or a birthday party or a barbecue, do you often think to invite people who are not in the same season of life as you? Older, younger, single, divorced, widowed, married. I have felt this a lot as a single person. There's been many times where my married friends, whether they have kids or not, have not thought to invite me to things. Especially the older I get and the more single I stay. People think, oh, she wouldn't want to come. So I just don't get invited. But the Lord has shown me his heart for making space for me through the junior family. And I love them so much. I was invited to live with them. And a month before the pandemic, I moved in. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into. Like, ha, we're stuck together. But even after I moved out, I still got invited to every birthday party, Christmas, every soccer game, and even most recently, a 5th grade graduation. Jesus makes space for us. I think we can get tunnel vision too with maybe people who are on the other side. Whatever the other side might be. We all know the hot button topics: gun rights, abortion, sexuality. It's really easy to get tunnel vision with people who are not like-minded with us. What about our lesbian neighbor or our gay coworker? Do we see them as people that we could become friends with, dine with, make space for? Tunnel vision can be so many different things. How might you have tunnel vision that prevents you from making space for everyone? I think it might be appropriate to say that we, of course, cannot welcome absolutely, like literally everyone. We have a limit, right? We need to have healthy boundaries with how many people we engage with at a time. But Jesus does not want us to put boundaries on who we engage with. It is one thing to limit potentially how many people, but it is another to limit who. Jesus chose to share his table with everyone. Thankfully, my story did not end in the locker room, right? Those whispers and stares. Here and now I am infamilied by the junior family, by my amazing staff team at Western CCF. I finally made it on the volleyball team. Woo! So why would I ever leave that? So much of me wants to stay and enjoy this inclusion and enjoy the family that I finally have. But I am going to Alaska because of Jesus. Because he made space for me so that I can make space for others. And I don't know if I'm going to show up with the wrong knee pads, if I'm going to make the same kind of friends or find a family like the juniors. But I'm going to join a movement of missionaries, and I'm really excited about it. These missionaries, it started with 2 missionaries, Steve and Aaron Pavic. And they, 8 years ago, they came to Anchorage and started Chi Alpha at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. And because they made space, everyone thinks that Steve looks like Tim. I just have to say it. I heard the giggles. I had to make a connection. We call on our staff team, we call Steve the wild Alaskan Tim. It's a joke that we've made. Okay, sorry. Back to the seriousness. These 2, because they welcomed everyone, not only has their student leadership team grown, it has grown full of Indigenous Native Alaskan students. Because Steve and Aaron made space for everyone, their community is diverse and growing. And those voices that would have historically been ignored and silenced are now amplified and encouraged. And I think that we all long for space to be made for everyone. Culturally, I think this is a very relevant idea, right? If I were to go to Western with a huge sign and stand in Red Square and say, "There's a space for you at my table. You are welcome. I want you to be seen and valued," whatever, I would probably be cheered. I would probably be like, "Rah, rah, yeah." That's not a common response to our evangelism. But I think we are all incapable of perfectly, impartially welcoming everyone. We fall short. Romans 3:23 says, everyone has sinned. Everyone has fallen short of God's glorious standard. And that is why Jesus said, "I have come to seek and save the lost." He finds us, he welcomes us, he saves us. We are all welcomed at this table, not because we've perfectly upheld all the laws or we've been the most inclusive, but because we can't and we aren't, and Jesus is. We are only invited to the Lord's table because of grace. Tim talked last week about how Jesus meets us where we are, but he does not leave us where we are. He wants to make us new. We are all at the table because of the cross. Where we fall short, Jesus stepped in. And it is only when Jesus is at the center of our lives, where we allow him to make us new, that we can truly make space for everyone else. If you are here today and you feel like space has not been made for you, I want you to know that Jesus died so that you would be seen and accepted and welcomed. You might also be here this morning and you might feel like, I think I have some tunnel vision. You might unknowingly think that you deserve to be at Jesus' table. Maybe this morning he wants to remind you that no one deserved a spot at his table. But because of his sacrifice, everyone is welcome. So we're going to take some time to reflect on a couple questions. And I just want you to ask the Lord, as you reflect, ask the Lord what he might be saying to you in this moment. And these questions are, who has made space for you? That might be a person, that might be Jesus. And I want you to also reflect on how might you have tunnel vision that prevents you from making space for everyone. I'm going to pray, and then we will jump into that. Lord Jesus, thank you so much that you are the good, good God that meets every one of us where we are, that you see us and you love us and you include us. And Lord, I just pray that wherever we are today, whatever we're going through, Lord, that we would hear you say, you are welcome at my table. They are welcome at my table. Lord, would you speak to us and show us what needs to be adjusted in our hearts, whether that means a truth that needs to be spoken or eyes that need to be opened. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
Thanks for listening. For more info, visit hcbellingham.com and join us any Sunday, 9 and 11 a.m.